Good morning, councillors. Good morning to all. Welcome to this statutory meeting of Falkirk Council on Wednesday, the 25th of May. Very good to see you all here today. We're joined by a couple of colleagues online because we're running this meeting as a hybrid. But of course, the meeting has also been live streamed via the council website. As returning officer, I'll preside at the meeting until the provost is appointed, following which the provost will take the chair. And we'll start with the sederant and Colin.
Thank you, Kenneth. Councillor Aitchison.
Here.
Councillor Anslow.
Here.
Councillor Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Buchanan.
Present.
Councillor Bundy.
Present.
Councillor Colley. Councillor Deacon. Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Present.
Councillor Hannah.
Present.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
I'm short.
Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Patrick. Councillor Redmond. Rich. Councillor Robertson. Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Spears.
Present.
And Councillor Steinbeyer.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interests they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. I will turn to item 3, the election of Falkirk councillors. This report advises the council of those who were elected to the council following the local government elections on the 5th of May. The results of the election set out at section 3 of the report, and the political composition of the council at section 4, and council is simply invited to note the results of the election and the political composition of the council. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, the appointment of provost and leader of the council. Colin.
Yes, thank you, Kenneth. And this is the point in the agenda where the council appoints its statutory convener, which is known in Falkirk and always has been as the provost. There is also an opportunity to appoint a deputy provost who would preside at council in the absence of the provost. And this is also the report under which the office of leader of the council will be appointed. But taking these in turn, the first will be provost. So I will simply ask for nominations from the floor for the role of provost. Councillor Steinbeck.
Nomination of Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. Any further nominations? Councillor Patrick.
I'd like to nominate James Kerr.
Thank you. Any further nominations? I see no further nominations. Accordingly, we will move to the vote, and I will ask each councillor in turn to indicate whether their vote is for Councillor Bissett or for Councillor Kerr. Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Abstain.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Mercer.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Kerr.
And Councillor Steinbach.
Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. There were 21 votes for Councillor Bissett. There were 8 votes for Councillor Kerr. There was 1 abstention. Councillor Bissett is elected with an absolute majority of the members of the council. I invite Councillor Bissett to come to take the chair, and Mr McWilliams at the same point will come forward to give him the chain of his office. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a short statement. It's a great honour to be elected as the Provost of Falkirk, and I'm grateful to the Council for putting its trust in me to perform this role. I would like to begin by thanking former Provost Buchanan for his work as Provost. He always chaired the Council meetings fairly, and I will strive to follow his example in that. He also worked tirelessly in civic duties. He will be a very hard act to follow, but I will try my best to the best of my ability. I was elected a Labour councillor, but I will be Provost for all councillors on this council and all the people of Falkirk. I will work hard to present a positive view of Falkirk and its districts as your civic head. As we start this 5-year term, we must move beyond the disagreements of the past. We are too often presented a picture of a council that was incapable of reaching agreement. We need to look forward. We need to promote collaboration and shared solutions to the problems and the challenges faced by our communities. Where we cannot agree, we must do so respectfully. I cannot emphasise that point enough. While I am Provost, we will conduct our debates and discussions with respect for one another, as per the Councillor's Code of Conduct. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome the newly elected councillors to the Council, and I hope you enjoy your first meeting. And once again, colleagues, I thank you for your trust you have placed in me.
Provost, could I say as the outgoing Provost that first of all I'd like to congratulate you on your appointment. I think you'll be a very worthy successor. But also say at this stage I would like to thank my Deputy Provost at the time, Councillor Anne Ritchie, for the wonderful work that she did during the time. Obviously we had a very difficult period where for nearly 2 years the position of Provost and Deputy Provost, we couldn't fulfil the event in terms of events because of the pandemic. But hopefully you'll have 5 years without any of that type of problem. And once again, I would concur with you. We have a lot of new members here, and I would like to wish every one of them success that they deserve and congratulate them all on their election to Falkirk Council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. We'll now move to, Mr Moody will move to the next item.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And we now move to the appointment of Deputy Provost. I ask for nominations for the role of Deputy Provost. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Mr Moody, and can I just first say congratulations to Councillor Bissett, and I look forward to being able to work very closely with you throughout the council and fully support your sentiments about that collaborative working going forward. We would like to put forward a nomination for Deputy Provost David Balfour.
Yep, thank you very much. I would like to nominate Councillor Kerr, please, for this position.
Further nominations. Councillor Spears.
I'd like to nominate Councillor McCabe for this position.
And any further nominations? Councillor Steinbach.
Nomination of Councillor Nimmo for this position.
Any further nominations? Okay. To recap, then, 4 nominations for this post, and again, I will ask each councillor to which of the councillors is their chosen candidate. We have Councillor Balfe, and we have Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Nimmo.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Binney. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Nimmo.
And myself going.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor McCabe.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Nimmo.
So, Provost, there are 12 votes for Councillor Balfour, there are 5 votes for Councillor Kerr, there are 3 votes for Councillor McCabe, and there are 9 votes for Councillor Nimmo. In those circumstances, none of the candidates has an absolute majority of the members of the Council, and in accordance with the standing orders, the candidate with the fewest votes drops out of the voting, and that in this case is Councillor McCabe. And accordingly, I'll ask you to vote again for the 3 remaining candidates, who are Councillor Balfour, Councillor Kerr, and Councillor Nimmo. And starting with you, Provost Bissett.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Binney. I beg your pardon, Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Balfour.
Deacon.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Nimmo.
Nimmo.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Kerr.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Nimmo.
Provost, there were 12 votes for Councillor Balfour. There were 8 votes for Councillor Kerr. There were 9 votes for Councillor Nimmo, and there was 1 abstention. And accordingly, the candidate with the fewest votes again drops out. That is Councillor Kerr. And we then take the vote between Councillor Balfour and Councillor Nimmo.
Provost.
Councillor Kerr.
Can we have a couple of minutes recess?
No problem, Councillor Kerr. How long would you want?
5 minutes.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And a reminder that the vote is now between Councillors Balfour and Nimmo. Provost Bissett. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Abstain.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Abstain.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Patrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Spears.
Abstain.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Nimmo.
Provost, there were 12 votes for Councillor Balfour, there were 11 votes for Councillor Nimmo, and there were 7 abstentions. And accordingly, Councillor Balfour is elected as Deputy Provost of the Council, and ask Councillor Balfour to come forward to allow Mr McWilliams to attach the chain. Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, Amanda there. Thank you.
I would just like to say well done to Councillor Balfour, and I really look forward to working with him in the future for the council and for the communities we serve.
Thank you, Provost. We now move to the third recommendation within the report, which is the question of whether the Council wishes to appoint any bailies. Bailies are ordinarily councillors who would assist the Provost and the Deputy Provost in their civic duties. The post was created in 2013, but there were no bailies appointed during the lifetime of the last Council. So the question is, first of all, is there any motion from the floor that we have bailies, or that any particular person is appointed to that role? I see no nomination or motion from the floor. Thank you, Provost. We then move to the appointment of the leader of the Council. So I ask again for nominations from the floor for the post of leader. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Happy to nominate Cecil Meiklejohn. I had waxed lyrical about it, but I'll leave that for later maybe.
Thank you. Any further nominations?
I nominate James Kerr.
Any further nominations? I see no further nominations, and accordingly the candidates for leader are Councillor Meiklejohn and Councillor Kerr, and I will ask each councillor to indicate which candidate they attach their vote to. Provost Bissett. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Abstain.
Councillor Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Deacon. Councillor Devine.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Hannah.
Abstain.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patterson.
Abstain.
Councillor Patrick. Councillor Redmond. Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson,
Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Sinclair,
Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Spears,
Abstain.
and Councillor Steenbank.
Abstain.
Thank you. Provost, there were 12 votes for Councillor Meikle-John, there were 5 votes for Councillor Kerr, and there were 13 abstentions, and accordingly Councillor Meikle-John is elected as the leader of the council.
I'd just like to say congratulations to Councillor Meikle-John and look forward to working with you as in the role of the Provost. Thank you. And we'll just have since we've just completed a few items here, we'll just have a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you. The standing orders, and go to Colin, Mr. Moody, please.
Thank you, Provost. And this item, as members can see, is for noting only, so it's simply to draw the attention of members to the standing orders of the council that we will be working with through the course of the next 5 years. The standing orders were reviewed towards the end of the lifetime of the last council. There is an opportunity to review during the course of the present council too. In no way are the standing orders to be seen as a tablet of stone. They are a living document which can change during the lifetime of the council as the needs of the council develop. So there will be an opportunity for review. There are 2 matters referred to in the standing orders that I think I should just draw members' attention to. At one point, there is a reference in the standing orders to the 3 main political groups of the council. And I think it's important to draw to the attention of the council provost that there are now 4 political groups on the council, all of whom qualify into that category of main political group. The reference to the 3 main political groups was in reference to the distribution of convenerships between the 2 executives for one point and the Scrutiny Committee and the Scrutiny Committee External. Those will be dealt with in the next item, and there is a manner in which the same aim can be achieved accommodating 4 political groups, which is the situation as it is now. The other item to refer to is the fact that the membership of the Executive and the Education, Children and Young People Executive is referred to as having 11 members. But you will see in the report on the following item that there is an option for the Council to return the membership to 12 members. And the reason for that is that the number 11 was a product of a decision, again, towards the end of the lifetime of the last council, a pragmatic reduction to allow a better proportionality to be accommodated within the membership of those 2 committees. So it would be entirely open to the council today to restore the membership in the following item to 12 members, and that's referred to in your next report. So on those 2 points, I'm simply open for questions at this stage or any issues any member has in relation to this report.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I think Mr. Moody, sorry, Councillor, not escalated you that far just yet, Colin. Mr. Moody refers that the standing order is not a tablet of stone. I think we need time for the council to bed down and to look at how our decision-making structures and operating procedures go over the next few months, and have the opportunity to reflect on that I think I would be personally happy to note the standing orders at this moment in time, with the opportunity to perhaps revisit that as and when things start to be more established and any changes be brought forward at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-Johnson. Anyone else got any questions? Thank you. Next item of business, agenda item 6, membership of committees, boards and significance. Back to everybody. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And this is the opportunity in the agenda to populate the Council's committees with the membership from among the councillors, to do the same with the boards to which the Council appoints, and also to appoint to a series of significant public bodies that are also referred to in the report. One of the key decisions to be made, I think, at the beginning of this item is to consider the issue of proportionality. And the Council ordinarily would determine proportionality at this stage on each of the committees and in the boards to which it appoints. And it's maybe worth just reminding members, Provost, that the standing orders do provide that the committees of the Council will, as far as reasonable, reflect the political balance of the Council. So the aim of the standing orders is to do what the Council can to reflect the proportionality among the membership of the Council. You will have seen, I think, however, that item 3.2, that the arithmetical proportionality, which is provided by the current membership of the Council in relation to the size of each body, doesn't produce whole numbers in many of the cases. So there will be decisions to be made in relation to how the proportionality is actually established in relation to each of the bodies, and that will be the decision which the Council will be called upon to make shortly. Once the proportionality has been established, any group which is allocated places can then inform me as to who the members will be. You don't need to read out the lists at the Council meeting this morning, and you will then become members of those committees or boards. One issue which I should refer to in relation to that is in relation to our independent members. As I noted in the previous item, we now have an independent group formed of 3 members, consisting of Councillor Spears, Councillor McCabe and Councillor Ritchie, I think entitled the non-aligned independent group. We also have Councillor Buchanan, who is an independent member, so there are 4 independent members of the Council, and that's the arithmetical calculation which is included within your report. The practice within this Council and the recommendation made within the report is, where there are independent members in this situation, is that where there are places allocated, as no doubt there will be, given that there are 4 from 30 within the membership on committees and boards, that how those are then populated is to be agreed among the independent members. So that would be between Councillor Buchanan and the non-aligned independent group. And in the absence of such agreement, that the decision would be made by Council as to which of the independent members is appointed. In relation to the significant boards and public bodies, the first which you're asked to appoint to is the Integration Joint Board. And that, as I think many of you will know, is now a significant governance level body for the Health and Social Care Partnership, responsible for planning and directing very significant resources within social care and the community health part of the Health Board budget. There are 3 places allocated to the Council as voting members of the Board, and the Council also has the right to appoint currently the Vice Chair of the Board. The Vice Chair and the Chair moves between the Health Board and the Council for appointment, but at the moment the Council's appointment lies for the Vice Chair. There are also a number of bodies which are set out in Appendix 4 to your report, and in relation to each of these there is information set out as to the nature of that body and what the appointment would involve. You're also being asked today to appoint 4 Counsellor Champions on 4 areas which are set out at section 17 of the report, and those are to appoint a Veterans Champion, an Older People's Champion, a Younger People's Champion, and an Equality and Human Rights Champion. And the role description for the Counsellor Champions is set out at Appendix 5 to your report. So, Provost, I would return again to the recommendations at that point, which again ask you to start with the issue of proportionality, but I will also pause there to see if there are any questions or points from members of the Council. Thank you.
Councillor Spears, would you like to come on?
Yeah, as regarding independent groups, we've already produced to the Chief Executive a document for the non-aligned independent group, and what you're now saying is that this decision on committee places can be placed in the hands of the full Council, and every other group has the luxury of determining their own members on committees. If you go back to the standing orders, the determination of a group, I think it's on page 19, main opposition groups, for those members constitute at least 10% of the Council. I would just like to bring to your attention that non-aligned independent groups is a recognised group in this sense.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. And Mr. Moody?
Yes, thank you, Provost. And I think there's no doubt that the non-aligned independent group is recognised as one of the main political groups. That was the point I was making in relation to the report on standing orders earlier. The practice of treating an independent group along with independent members who are not members of that group is a long established practice within Falkirk Council. It's one that the Council could choose to depart from if that was its decision, but it does raise the question then of how would an independent member sitting on their own in Councillor Buchanan's position then be allocated places on committees. And I think the Provost, you talked about the importance of inclusion and collaboration in your opening remarks, and that may not be the best way to achieve that, but it's a decision for Council if it wishes to adhere to its previous practice, which certainly, as long as I can remember, was the practice in relation to independent members, even when among the independent members a group formed. And I think Councillor Spears and Councillor McCabe may recall the same process occurred in 2012 on the formation of the then non-aligned independent group.
Can I come back in? You have just deemed that we are others again, which was the previous practice. I refer back to my document I gave to the Chief Executive Officer, and of which you are aware that we are a recognised group, constituting some 10% of this Council.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. Any further comment?
I think there's...
Councillor Meiklejohn?
Thank you, Provost. And I don't know whether you want to perhaps break this down into sections, but if I could perhaps move at least part of a motion that covers the proportionality and maybe a view in relation to comments that have been made there. And based on the numbers and recognising that they're not whole numbers, I would move that the executives that have 12 members, along with planning, be balanced as SNP 5, Labour 4, Conservative 2, Independent 1. Civic licensing balanced as a 10-member committee, and as other 10-member committees to be SNP 4, Labour 3, Conservative 2, Independent 1, and scrutiny committees and appeals committee balanced with SNP 3, Labour 3, Conservative 1 and Independent 1, and that would be similar numbers to the Joint Valuation Board. Audit Committee and Pension Committees are 6-member committees, and suggest they be balanced as SNP 2, Labour 2, Conservative 1, and Independent 1, and the Appointments Committee be balanced with SNP 3, Labour 2, and Conservative 1, as it has been in the past. I would, recognising the need to be inclusive of all members, feel more comfortable if we were able to include the independent members as a 4 member, and that places be allocated accordingly. Otherwise, I think we run the risk of not being inclusive for the whole council going forward. Perhaps if I could pause there and maybe just take that part first to see if there's any further discussion around that.
Is Councillor Meikle-John, is that a motion you're putting forward just now?
Yes.
Have you got a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Could we circulate that motion?
If it helps to circulate the full motion that covers the whole, I'm happy to do that. I just thought it might be helpful to break things down in sections.
Okay, and then we'll have a 10-minute recess, or 10 or 15-minute recess to discuss it. Thank you. Further to the recess and the discussion around Councillor Meikle-John's motion, do we have any amendments?
I'd like to propose an
Councillor
amendment. So an amendment to 2.11 of the motion. We'd like to change it to executives will have 11 members, and along with and as follows, the split would be SNP 4, Labour 3, Conservative 2, Independent 2, for the purposes of, especially on the executive body, to promote inclusivity and the collaborative working approach and the best value report, and many have expressed over the 3 weeks since the election. I think that would be a split that more accurately reflects that. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'm very happy to second that motion. That's
Councillor Kelly. Any other amendments? Councillor Spears.
Thank you, Provost. The non-aligned independent group amendment is we'd like to reiterate, and I've said this now on about 3 or 4 occasions, we're a recognised group. We would also like to remove 2.4 of the motion in relation to the proportionality set out above. I would state here, Councillor Buchanan is free to approach any group within this council, right? Why you would put him with us when there's been no approach made to us is beyond me, and it concerns me about the democratic approach of this council, where you would surmise and put in a motion that that Councillor Buchanan was part of this group. I mean, we've been very clear, and the Chief Executive can pass round a letter to him, which was delivered to him on Friday and fully signed up and delivered to him this morning, that it is not for other groups besides our group. I would not do it to any other group in this council, and to bring forward a motion to do it to us is quite wrong. So in relation to proportionality, set out that the non-aligned group are a recognised constituted group. Councillor Buchanan is only recognised independent councillor that's not part of a group. The proportionality entitlement of the non-aligned group must be recognised by this council. And I can say in this motion, why has Councillor Buchanan not been put in with other groups? To suddenly say that he's in our group goes beyond their gift. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Spears?
I'll second it, Provost.
So let's just clarify, we have an amendment moved by Councillor Steenbank and seconded by Councillor Kelly. In accordance with the standing orders, we deal with one amendment at a time, though it's helpful that we have notice of the further amendment from Councillor Spears, which we'll come to after the amendment from Councillor Steenbank. So to clarify, the motion that we have in front of us just now and moved by Councillor Meikle-John and seconded by Councillor Garner deals with points 0.1 to 2.14 on the circulated paper, which is establishing the proportionality on the committees, boards and other bodies. And Councillor Meikle-John has also moved 2.4, which is the mechanism for dealing with the independent member and the non-aligned independent group in relation to appointment to committees. We'll come to that when we deal with the further amendment. So the first vote, Provost, then, is accordingly the motion as described, against which there is the amendment moved by Councillor Steenbank and seconded by Councillor Kelly, which amends 2.1 with it to substitute an executive of 12 members for the two executives having 11 members, a balance 10p4, 3, Conservative 2, and Independent 1. So I'll move to the vote and ask members to indicate whether their vote is for the motion or for amendment. Provost Bishop.
I support the amendment.
Deputy Provost Balfour. Councillor Aitchison.
Amendment.
Councillor Anslow.
Amendment.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Deacon.
The motion.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Motion.
Councillor Hannah.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Amendment.
Councillor Meikle-John.
For the motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
The motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
For the motion.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
The motion.
Councillor Sinclair.
The motion.
Councillor Spears.
Amendment.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Amendment.
There are 17 votes for the motion. There are 13. Excuse me a moment while I swap microphone. To the amendment which was moved by Councillor Spears and seconded by Councillor McCabe, and that is to delete item 2.4, moved by Councillor Meikle and seconded by Councillor Garner. Provost Bissett.
Well, sorry, Provost. So all the amendment as delete 2.4.
That's as I understood the motion as moved. I think the issue Councillor Spears is taking issue with is the practice of treating the non-aligned independent group of 3 along with Councillor Buchanan as an independent member and asking those members among themselves to agree the appointments to independent places, which failing the council would take the decision. The question which perhaps arises from the deletion of 2.5 is what the consequence of I think the danger is it perhaps leaves the council without a mechanism for appointing, or alternatively, if the intention is that the appointments can be made only from the non-aligned independent.
Provost, can our group have a 5-minute recess? It's a
No problem at all.
very important
Absolutely.
issue.
5-10 minutes, Councillor Kerr?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. And there's people online watching that just can't quite hear. So if you always remember to switch on your microphone and speak up a bit. So we'll now go to the vote. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you. And just to remind members that the vote is in relation to the motion moved by Councillor Meikle, seconded by Councillor Carter, which were points 211 to 214 in the circulated motion, along with 2.4 within the circulated, against which there is an amendment moved by Councillor Spears and seconded by Councillor McCabe, which was to delete 2.4 within that motion.
I'll just ask Councillor Patterson, do you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think my question's been answered, so it was just about the motion 2.5, but I'm assuming we're dealing with 0.1 to 0.4 first, and then moving on.
So just to clarify again, Provost, the motion as moved by Councillor Meikle were the first 4 items in the written paper, so that balancing of the committees and bodies, but also the section at 2.4, which dealt with the question of how to deal with the independent group and the member. And that suggests dealing with those members of the council together. And that's the issue which is before us now, because Councillor Spears has moved that aspect of Councillor Meikle motion be deleted. Provost Bissett.
Excuse me, sorry, Provost. Can you just pick up on Councillor Mr. Moody's? Sorry, Colin. Just to try and clarify the deletion of 2.4. During the recess there, we were approached by Councillor Buchanan to indicate that he's willing to speak to us next week at some point. So therefore there will be some dialogue between the non-aligned group and Councillor Buchanan.
So Buchanan, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Provost. always stand for the provost, thank you. I had a wee word with Councillor Ritchie during the recess, and we're talking about positions later on. I'm quite happy. We tried this a few years ago, but the fact of the matter is, on that particular issue, 2.4, and what the vote's all about, I'm quite happy to go with the motion, because if they try and delete that, then that would make sure that I would have no representation. And the fact is that I'm really disappointed that they've come forward with that amendment in that case. So yeah, I would just like to follow on and go with the vote as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarran. We'll go to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor McCabe, you want to come back in? Could you put your mic on, please?
I beg your pardon, sorry about that. I'll just reiterate that we are not trying to prevent Councillor Buchanan's representation on any of the committees positions which are up for filling. What we are particularly aggrieved at is in relation to 2.4, where in the absence of agreement, appointments will be made by council. Now that refers to what the non-aligned independence group will have to accept. We're not happy about that. We would like to see that deleted. So therefore, maybe if I'm just trying to clarify here for Councillor Buchanan, we're more than happy for Councillor Buchanan to speak to us. As we've said, we're more than happy to speak to any political group. So in light of that, we would still like to see, it's not, just to clarify to Councillor Buchanan, we are not taking 2.4 out of there to prevent Councillor Buchanan sitting on any committee at all. That's quite the reverse of where we're coming from. All we're looking for is the non-aligned independent group to be recognised, whether it's 3 or whether following discussion with Councillor Buchanan it becomes 4. So I would suggest that potentially, just reading this again, in relation to the proportionality set out above, reference to independent members are either to a member of the non-aligned independent group or Councillor Buchanan, with membership to be agreed between the group and Councillor Buchanan. That infers the non-aligneds must do something. The non-aligneds have stated their position. They're open to discussion with Councillor Buchanan. Following that, next week, we would hope to come back. But again, critical, we do not want it put down or accepted that in the absence of agreement, appointments will be made by the administration.
Travis, could I perhaps clarify, because I think there has been a bit of a misunderstanding there, and that what it means is the appointments would be made by the council, it would be from the independent members and not by the administration. It would not be others that would be taking up those particular positions. It would still be independent members, but they would be appointed by the council if they cannot reach agreement. And Mr. Libby can maybe confirm that is what's intended by that statement.
Yes, Provost, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So we have our motion, we have an amendment, so go to the vote.
Provost Bissett.
Motion.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Aitchison.
Motion.
Councillor Anslow.
Motion.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Bundy.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Deacon.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest.
Motion.
Councillor Garner.
Motion.
Councillor Hannah. Councillor Hannah, I think you may be muted.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Patrick.
Motion.
Councillor Redmond.
Motion.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
Councillor Spears.
Amendment.
And Councillor Steinbank. Provost, there are 27 members for the motion, 3 for the amendment, and the motion is carried.
Thank you.
Provost, I think we then move to the next stage in Councillor Meiklejohn's motion, which is in relation to the appointment of conveners and deputy conveners. And I think, Provost, it would be appropriate to hear from Councillor Meiklejohn in relation to that aspect of our motion.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Sorry for that delay. Thank you, Provost. And obviously, having declared myself as leader of the council, goes hand in hand with the convenerships of the executives, and we've already agreed with proportionality. Therefore, that's why the convenership of the executives should sit with the leader of the council. There's then on to another number of appointments of the committees below. As has been determined by our standing orders, and therefore we will not be putting nominations forward for those. We are open to having that shared across the council, and therefore we welcome nominations coming from the other groups accordingly to those, and I think that helps to demonstrate our desire to work collaboratively across the piece. The remunerations will be dealt with it later on in the paper, and that may take a bit of working out, and just maybe it's worth saying at this point that may have to be deferred until we actually know who's in what position and what's available by way of the sort of funding to come forward to be able to do that. So I'm happy then to move what is in our paper for the various aspects, and I'm sure you want to go through them individually. And we will nominate where we've indicated.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I move for an amendment on motion 2.5, which states that Councillor Colley would be appointed to the Vice Chair of the IJB.
We're not calling for that yet, Councillor Patterson. If you could just hold back on that, please.
Speaking.
And Provost, just to clarify, I think if we were taking the issues just sequentially through Councillor Meiklejohn's motion, the point at which she was moving at this stage was 2.2 and 2.12. So firstly, in relation to 2.2, it's the distribution of the convenership between the executives and Education, Children and Young People Executive on the one hand, being associated with the council administration, and secondly, that the convenerships of audit scrutiny and external scrutiny be reserved to the 3 main opposition groups and shared between the 3 main opposition groups, so there would be no administration nomination to any of those convenerships. Thereafter, there would be the question of filling the remaining convenerships and deputy convenerships of the committees, and we will come on to the IGB, I think, after this when we get to 2.5 in the motion. But first of all, there's the internal council convenerships to deal with.
Councillor Kerr.
Can I just have some clarity, Provost, with regards, and it's not down here as well, but regarding the civic licence vice convener and the planning vice convener, are they not decided when the meeting of these committees have the first meeting? And is that the same as the licence board? The licence board will determine who the convener is and the vice convener at their first meeting? Just for some clarity.
Thank you, Provost. Maybe starting with the final question first. It's very clear with the licensing board that the board is a separate body. So the board appoints its own convener and its own deputy convener from among the members of the board who are appointed by the council. For the civic licensing committee, the vice convener is, according to our standing orders, appointed by the council. I think in the past there hasn't been an appointment made on some occasions, so there's been an informal arrangement at the committees themselves as to who will take the role in the absence of the convener. But it is open to the council to appoint the vice conveners at this meeting today.
Is that in both civic and planning?
That's correct, Provost.
Any other questions?
Provost, if there is no amendment to this aspect of Councillor Meikle-John's motion, then it can be taken as agreed that the section A, that the convenerships of the Executive Education Children Young People Executive should rest with the council leader, and that the three other convenerships mentioned will be reserved to the three main opposition groups. So that will be one for Labour, one for the Conservatives, and one for the non-aligned independent group to appoint from. But there are a number of other convenerships to be dealt with, and which I think we should take one by one. I think there may be some advantage in perhaps a short recess, Provost, if we maybe have an opportunity for the opposition groups to perhaps determine between them which of the committees they would like to appoint the convener to. So the three of those are audit, scrutiny, and scrutiny external. And it's one from Labour, one from Conservative, and one from the non-aligned independent group.
So would we like a recess? Okay, 10-minute recess. Thank you. Hope you've had a chance to discuss these positions. If you order, please. Hope you've had a chance to discuss positions with the group leaders, and I'll hand over to Mr. Moody to summarise.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And the point at which we went into recess was the question of the convenerships of the audit, scrutiny, and scrutiny external committees, which are to be reserved and shared between the three main opposition groups. And the recess was to give an opportunity for the leaders of each of those groups to discuss among themselves how those committees could be shared. I understand that there is an agreement, but I would invite one of the group leaders to perhaps share that with the rest of the council.
Councillor Steenbank?
There was a clarification which I'll pass on to Councillor Spears or Councillor Kerr on, but the audit committee has been agreed to be convened by a Labour representative. I'm not sure whether this is the right opportunity to nominate the convener or just clarify that point.
I think, Provost, if we establish the share first, we can come back and hear who the conveners will be.
Councillor Spears?
I would say the independent group has made a decision on internal scrutiny, and we have chosen one of our men.
Councillor Kerr?
Know that we've got what's left, but we've taken somebody to be convener of external scrutiny.
this would maybe be an opportunity for each of the leaders and Councillor Steenbank as deputy leader just to advise now who the conveners will be in each.
So the nomination is for Councillor Anslow, the position of convener of the Audit Committee.
The nomination is for Councillor Brian McCabe of the Internal Scrutiny Committee.
And Councillor Brown for external scrutiny.
And thank you, Provost, as these are reserved for the three main opposition groups, and the groups have made the nomination. There is no call for further nominations, and those three nominees are appointed as the conveners of those committees. So, Provost, we now then move into the remainder of the appointments of conveners, which are set out at Appendix 1 in the report. And to summarise again, we now have a convener of the Executive, we have a convener of the Education, Children and Young People's Executive, we have a convener of the Scrutiny Committee, the Scrutiny Committee External, and also a convener of the Audit Committee. So in the order that they are set out within the appendix, I ask for nominations, first of all, for the convener of the Appeals Committee.
Any nominations? No takers?
Sorry,
Sorry.
can I nominate Councillor Gary Bowes?
Any other for nominations, Provost? In the absence of any other nominations, Provost, then Councillor Bowes would be duly appointed as the convener of the Appeals Committee. We move then to the Deputy Convener of the Appeals Committee, and once again, Provost asks for nominations.
Any nominations? Councillor Platt?
I nominate Councillor Steenbank.
No other nominations?
That being so, Provost, the Deputy Convener is now Councillor Steenbank. We move then to the convenership of the Appointments Committee. I ask again for nominations.
Any nominations?
I'd like to propose Councillor Meiklejohn. Sorry, my light's not working on that.
Point of clarification. Carry on. This is only between three parties and not four parties, I believe.
No, it would be competent for an independent member, either Councillor Buchanan or a member of the non-aligned independent group, to be nominated. You raise a helpful point, though, Councillor Spears, because you haven't yet agreed among yourselves as to who would be the members of each of the committees. If there is a nominee from either your own group or of Councillor Buchanan, they would need to be a brief recess to allow the discussion to take place as to whether that person was going to be a member of the committee in the first instance, and in the absence of such agreement, a decision of council to allow that to happen, and that would perfect the nomination to allow that position to proceed.
So do you need a short recess?
And perhaps, Provost, sorry to add there, maybe just for this particular appointment, although Councillor Spears' point is extremely helpful from the point of view of the rest of the committees, there isn't an independent place on the Appointments Committee.
I think that was the original question.
No other nominations?
Thank you, Provost. And we now move to the Civic Licensing Committee.
Any nominations for the Civic Licensing Committee convener? Councillor Patterson?
I would like to nominate Councillor Steenbank.
Any other? Councillor Spears?
I would like to nominate Councillor Anne Ritchie.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
So that being the case, Provost, the point I was making earlier in response to Councillor Spears' point will now arise, because we will need the agreement between the non-aligned independent group and Councillor Buchanan as to whether Councillor Ritchie will be the independent representative on the Civic Licensing Committee. It might be that a short recess would be the easiest way to deal with that issue, unless Councillor Buchanan is able to say that he is content with that at present.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan.
That being so, Councillor Ritchie is the independent representative on the Civic Licensing Committee and is nominated as the convener thereof. We therefore have two nominations, Provost. We have Councillor Ritchie and we have Councillor Steenbank. Provost Bissett. Deputy Provost Balfour.
Abstain.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Steenbank.
Councillor Anslow.
Steenback.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Colley.
Abstain.
Councillor Deacon.
Abstain.
Councillor Devine.
Abstain.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Abstain.
Councillor Hannah. Councillor Hannah, if you could repeat your vote there, I don't think we heard it in the room.
Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Abstain.
Councillor Murtaugh. Councillor Nimmo.
Steenbank.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Steenbank.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Steenbank.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Abstain.
Councillor Sinclair.
Abstain.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Ritchie.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you.
Could I ask for a point of order if there was a mistake made with a casting vote, if that can be changed?
Provost, once the vote has been taken, no, the vote is cast.
Thank you.
Provost, there are 9 votes for Councillor Steenbank. There are 8 votes for Councillor Ritchie. There were 13 abstentions, and Councillor Steenbank is duly appointed as the convener. Provost, we don't require to make appointments to the Common Good committees. Those are appointed ex officio from the Provost and the Deputy Provost and the members of the respective formal burghal areas. So we move on to the Pensions Committee. So it's nominations for, I beg your pardon, I think a point is being made from the floor that we have missed the Deputy Convener of Civic Licensing. So nominations for the Deputy Convener.
Could I, Provost, nominate Councillor David Balfour?
I nominate Councillor James Kerr.
No other nominations?
So accordingly, Provost, the nominees are Deputy Provost Balfour and Councillor Kerr. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Kerr.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
David Balfour.
Councillor Aitchison.
Abstain.
Councillor Anslow.
Abstain.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Deacon.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Devine.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Hannah.
Abstain.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Murtagh.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Nimmo.
Abstain.
Councillor Patterson.
Abstain.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Redmond.
Abstain.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Sinclair.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Kerr.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Abstain.
Provost, there were 12 votes for Deputy Provost Balfour. There were 10 votes for Councillor Kerr. There were 8 abstentions, and Deputy Provost Balfour is duly appointed as the Deputy Convener. Provost had previously indicated that there is no need for nominations to the Common Good Committee, so we'll skip over those in the appendix, and we move on to the Pensions Committee and nominations for the convenership of that committee.
Any nominations? Councillor Meiklejohn.
Provost, can I nominate Councillor Lorna Binney?
Any other nominations?
Provost, in the absence of any other nominations, Councillor Binney is duly appointed as the convener of the Pensions Committee. We turn to the Deputy Convener of the Pensions Committee and any nominations for that post. Provost, in the absence of any nominations, that will remain vacant until further appointment by Council. We move then, Provost, to the convenership of the Planning Committee, and again, any nominations for the convenership of Planning Committee.
Councillor Steinbank.
Nomination of Councillor Buchanan.
Any other nominations?
Could I nominate Councillor Gary Burns?
Provost, prior to proceeding to the vote between Councillor Bowes and Councillor Buchanan, it needs to be clarified as whether Councillor Buchanan is the independent representative on the Planning Committee. Again, that's a matter for discussion and agreement between the non-aligned independent group and Councillor Buchanan. It may be appropriate, Provost, to allow a short recess to allow that discussion to take place. In the absence of agreement, as previously agreed, we would then need to determine as Council as to who the independent representative was on the committee.
Spears. We have as yet not decided on our membership of planning who we will put forward. Once the non-aligned independent group meet, we will ascertain that decision.
Provost, if the non-aligned independent group aren't in a position to have that discussion this morning, then it would be appropriate then to continue consideration of this particular convenership to a later opportunity. I think Councillor Meiklejohn has already referred to the need for some other items to be continued to a later date, particularly the issue of the remuneration, which will come to later in the agenda. So I think it's likely we will be hearing a motion to continue the proceedings of this meeting at a later stage to a date next week. That would allow, I think, Councillor Spears and his group to have an opportunity to consider positions on groups and also an opportunity to discuss that with Councillor Buchanan.
A small interjection. Our group has already considered positions on groups.
I perhaps misunderstood the point you were making earlier, where I thought you said you hadn't considered who would be your representative on the particular
No, it
committee.
highlights the point I made that you are making decisions for our group. We are a constituted, recognised group, a non-aligned independent group.
So, Provost, I think the question still arises, is Councillor Spears and his group wanting the opportunity to have the discussion with Councillor Buchanan just now on the question of the membership of the Planning Committee, in which case there can be a short recess, or, as I understood him to say, they're not in a position to do that just now, in which case continuing the matter to a continuation of this meeting next week would allow an opportunity for that to happen.
I have had a request from Councillor McCabe to go forward for the Planning Committee chair. Do you want a short recess to meet with Councillor Buchanan and have a chat? Well, really, I mean, okay. I thought what you said was you were going to meet up next week with Councillor Buchanan and your group. As you are aware, this is not next week. This is now. And you're making. But are you still going to meet up, or do you want to make a decision now? I have already put forward the nomination. So you're putting forward Councillor McCabe as your nominee from your group? As you would as a group leader, yes. Right, okay, thank you.
So I think we can perhaps infer from that, Provost, that there is an absence of agreement if Councillor Buchanan, his view is that he wishes to be a member of the Planning Committee. I wonder if Councillor Buchanan would confirm if that's the case.
I confirm that is the case. Thank you.
That being so, Provost, there appears to be an absence of agreement between Councillor Buchanan and the non-aligned independent group as to the independent membership of the planning committee, and in accordance with the paragraph 2.4 already agreed from the leader's motion, that then falls to council to determine who is the independent member on the planning committee, and that is a matter to be determined precedent to the determination of who will be the convener. Accordingly, Provost, we effectively have two nominations for the independent role in the planning committee. One is Councillor Buchanan and the other is Councillor McCabe. Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Buchanan.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Abstain.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Colley.
Abstain.
Councillor Deacon.
Abstain.
Councillor Devine.
Abstain.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest.
Abstain.
Councillor Garner.
Abstain.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Abstain.
Councillor Murtagh.
Abstain.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Patrick. Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Abstain.
Councillor Sinclair.
Abstain.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor McCabe.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Buchanan.
Provost, there are 15 votes for Councillor Buchanan, there are 2 votes for Councillor McCabe, and there are 13 abstentions. Councillor Buchanan is accordingly the independent representative on the planning committee, and we can now proceed with the vote in relation to the appointment of convener of the planning committee. And the 2 nominees were Councillor Buchanan and Councillor Bowes. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Buchanan.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest.
Councillor Bound.
Councillor Garner.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Bowes.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Buchanan.
Provost, there are 17 votes for Councillor Buchanan, there are 13 votes for Councillor Bowes, and Councillor Buchanan is duly appointed as the convener of the Planning Committee. We turn now, Provost, to the Deputy Convener of the Planning Committee and ask again for nominations.
Nominations for Deputy Convener. Councillor Nicholson.
Again, Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Kelly.
Hi, Councillor Kerr. Sorry, Kerr.
Thank you.
And Provost, just as a reminder, we have 3 nominations for the position of Deputy Convener of the Planning Committee, who are Councillor Bowes, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Kerr. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Kelly.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Bowes.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Councillor Kelly.
Provost, there were 14 votes for Councillor Bowes. There were 9 votes for Councillor Kelly. There were 6 votes for Councillor Kerr with 1 abstention. None of the candidates have an absolute majority of the membership. Councillor Kerr drops out of the vote and we vote again between Councillor Bowes and Councillor Kelly. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Kelly.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Bowes.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Councillor Kelly.
Provost, we have 15 votes for Councillor Bowes. We have 15 votes for Councillor Kelly. There is no casting vote in relation to the appointment of members, and when members are tied, then we need to draw lots, which is done by cutting a set of playing cards. So I'm going to ask Councillor Bowes and Councillor Kelly if they could approach the front of the bench here, just being careful not to trip on any of the wires in the centre of the hall while we unseal a fully sealed and new pack of playing cards.
Can we add a bit of drama to the proceedings and have it done in camera?
And Provost, there is a 6 being drawn there by Councillor Bowes. A 10 has been drawn by Councillor Kelly. Provost, that concludes the selection of conveners and deputy conveners in pursuance of the Leader's motion. We now move to the section on the integration joint board, and I think it would be appropriate to return to the Leader to speak to that aspect of her motion.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, apologies, Provost. Okay, thank you. Just to say that Councillor Colley has been quite integral in the Education Joint Board over the last 5 years, and we have seen strides, etc., taken forward. I think it's important that there's an element of continuity and being able to be taken forward within the Integrated Joint Board, considering it's at a very critical point in time. In the past, these positions have not always been shared, and that on one occasion the administration took all the places, and it was only in the last 5 years that these were shared across the council as they were within the groups. But it was critical that the administration did have a particular role in the IJB and moving it forward. We recognise, however, that there is a deficit, but it's not within our gift at this particular time to be able to address that particular deficit, because it requires a wider review of the integration scheme and agreement from the Health Board and indeed from Scottish Ministers to be able to change the numbers of members on the IJB. That's something that's already in play, and we'd look to take that forward. However, in order to be able to continue that continuity with the IJB, I would move that the SNP would have 2 members, and those would be Councillor Colley and Councillor Devine, and as has been in the last council, that the Labour group have the remaining place within the IJB.
Thank you, Councillor John.
I'll be second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. Do we have any other nominations for IGB? Councillor Patterson?
I would like to move an amendment and have Councillor Annie Hannah as a nomination and potentially as the Vice Chair on that list.
Councillor Kerr?
No nomination, Provost, but can I just comment on what the leader of the council says, that it's imperative that we keep pushing forward for another space for the other groups, talking about being inclusive and collaboration. Today's meeting, but I hope that going forward that way, and I know it's not all in the council's hands, understand that, but for it to be all inclusive, everybody needs to be represented. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr.
Provost, I think it would be helpful just to clarify Councillor Patterson's position. As I understand Councillor Patterson's contribution, it wasn't to alter the political balance on the appointment to the Integration Joint Board. It was to maintain 2 SNP positions with 1 Labour, and I think you were indicating that Councillor Hannah would be the Labour appointment to the Integration Joint Board. But as I also understood you, you were nominating Councillor Hannah, having been appointed as the Labour nominee, to take the position of Vice Chair of the Integration Joint Board. And accordingly, Provost, we would then have Councillor Spears.
Could be a point of clarification. I thought there was an amendment come forward to the Labour bench.
I think the point has been clarified, Councillor Spears, that it wasn't an amendment. It was essentially to say that the political balance would stay as it was. There was clarification that Councillor Hannah would take the Labour place on a political balance of 2 SNP and 1 Labour, but subsequently that the nomination for Vice Chair of the Integration Joint Board from Councillor Patterson would be Councillor Hannah, and that would be simply as a nomination against the nomination already made by Councillor Meikle-John of Councillor Colley.
You come back in, Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, Provost. Can we have a short recess? A very important office and a very important position, and for just to get that flung at you straight away, our group would like to have a discussion, if that's possible.
Colin, it might be helpful for members just to understand how the rotation around the chair and the vice chair works with the integrated joint board.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I'm happy to confirm that there is a role of chair of the Integration Joint Board and there's a role of vice chair. One is appointed by the council and one is appointed by the health board, but those roles rotate every 2 years. So at the moment, the health board has the appointment of the chair and the council has the appointment of the vice chair. And in most recently, Councillor Colley has held the role of vice chair within the Integration Joint Board, but as there's a new council, that requires to be reconsidered and a fresh appointment made. And I can see, Provost, that Councillor Hannah has her hand up as well.
Councillor Hannah?
Hello. Just wanted to say before, if there is going to be a recess before people have the discussions, although I've not been on the joint board, I'm very well aware of the importance. I worked in a health and social care department for many years, and I know very well the importance of health and social care. I absolutely agree that there is a need for continuity, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be continuity with the same individual in the vice chair position. In terms of the overall addition of another post, I would agree with that, and I would be very keen to take that forward to get another council representative onto the joint board. I am very concerned that we do have a collaborative approach here to all the positions in terms of the way that we are working. My knowledge of health and social care is quite extensive, and I feel sure that I could work with the other council appointees on the joint, on the joint board to take things forward in a collaborative way, which I think is important.
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. Now go to Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Provost. It's just a clarification point. Colin, can you maybe just clarify when these positions are due to rotate again? Am I right in thinking it's only recently happened?
I think we have the helpful addition of, among our officers here, the IGB's own governance officer. So, David, I wonder if you could confirm that for me. Thank you very much. And just for those who maybe didn't hear that joining remotely, the answer was March next year.
Mrs. Colley?
Thank you. I just actually wanted to make comment on the issue around the 4 places, and I agree wholeheartedly that is needed, and I think we need representation from across the council. It's been quite difficult to progress, and primarily because of COVID, and I think that the attention has been, for both the health board and the health and social care partnership, has been directed towards that, absolutely understandably. I would hope that the health board would feel so minded to put forward additional members, because I think it would very much benefit the IJB and the council to have that broader inclusivity.
Thanks, Councillor Colley. At this point, I think we'll break for lunch, and that'll give everybody a chance to discuss the IGB position. Can I suggest we come back here for about 2:15? Thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have any comment to make after your discussion on IGB?
No comment, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson?
Provost, in identifying a way forward, I've got a proposal that I would like to put in relation to the IJB. It would be that if Anne and the Labour Group were content for Fiona to finish her term to March 2023, at that point the convenership would then change, and there's potential there for a Labour nomination to go into the chair. And then we could perhaps look at that on a rotational basis. Honestly, I just had water at lunchtime. A rotational basis going forward. and it would also give us the opportunity to pursue changing the integration scheme to look at increasing the membership on the IJB going forward. So I see that as perhaps a potential pragmatic way of going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle. John, Councillor Steinbank, did you have anything to add?
Yes. Therefore, I think we'll withdraw the amendment proposed by Councillor Patterson before the lunch break.
Mr. Moody?
Yes, thank you, Provost. And I think where we were before the lunch break was that we had two nominations. Now I think one withdrawn, and the consequence that Councillor Colley has agreed as the Vice Chair of the Innovation Board. And before we move further through the agenda, Provost, I understand that Councillor Hannah has a motion wishes to move.
Councillor Hannah, are you there?
Hello. I think given the length of time that this meeting has taken so far, it would be advisable to adjourn and defer the remaining matters to a meeting next week. So I move that we defer the other matters to next week.
Do you have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Provost, we're halfway through an item and there's a number of other things that have a time pressures on them, in particular the COSLA representation. That needs to be advised to COSLA before the nominations for spokespersons, presidents, etc. can be made. So while I have no difficulty with perhaps deferring item 7, as I was intending to propose anyway, and the appointments in item 8, if we were able to deal with things that were urgent, and perhaps item 9 we could easily deal with without any controversy, then I could make a plea that we finish this item and deal with the urgent items and anything else that can be dealt with the rest being continued to further meeting, perhaps next week.
Okay, thank you. Any comment, Councillor Steinbank, on that?
Pass any further comment back to
Councillor Hannah, my apologies.
Can I check what is the actual deadline for the decisions you're talking about?
Provost, if I could assist there, I think the decision that is being referred to is the nomination of COSLA delegates, which require to be notified to COSLA. I think that decision which remains to be made in today's meeting. The rest of them may fall into the more desirable to be made, but probably aren't in the essential category. The only one.
You want to come back in, Councillor Nicholson?
Just to say, I think as we're halfway through this item, I don't think there should be too much by further controversy, and there may well be things that we could easily agree on. For example, the champions might be something we'd be able to agree on, and then defer the rest. Notwithstanding, we need to make a decision around the COSLA delegation.
Councillor Hannah?
Sorry, I'm still not getting an answer to the question I asked. What exactly are the pressing deadlines?
If I can assist again, Provost, I think the one which is the pressing deadline is the COSLA delegates. where the notification requires to be made by Friday. So that would be one where it would be useful to have the decision of council before we adjourn to any other meeting this week. The rest of them, I think, are on the question of, is it desirable to finish this particular item or not? I'm in the hands of council on that.
Colin can also highlight that there's a community planning board coming up as well, and we are awaiting the delegation in order to issue papers. I think that's within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, so what's the feeling in the room? That continue? Councillor Spears? I would move we continue. There's a lot of people here work for a living, and just getting days off at a drop of the hat is not always the easiest thing. We have convened today to form a council, and that should be the paramount importance of today's meeting. So I would move we continue. Thanks, Councillor Spears. Councillor Kerr?
Councillor Hannah proposed a motion, so it would either need to be retracted or an amendment come forward.
A good point, Councillor Kerr. Is there an amendment?
I would move then an amendment that we continue the meeting.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Spears?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCabe.
Provost, could I say that we continue to perhaps complete this item and deal with the COSA delegation and defer the rest of the items to another meeting? I'm very aware that it has been a long day for members, and there has been a lot to take in today, and I have a lot of sympathy with what Anne's saying, but there are a couple of things I think we do need to complete.
So if I can clarify, then procedurally, Provost, we have a motion to adjourn the meeting to a day next week, and if I can say provisionally, there is a day arranged for Wednesday next week in the anticipation that this may have been required. That motion is moved by Councillor Hannah and seconded by Councillor Steenbank. Councillor Spears, seconded by Councillor McCabe, has moved instead that we continue. There is effectively a notice of a further amendment from Councillor Meiklejohn, which is that we continue to conclude the present item, which we have before us, and also deal with the COSLA delegates, and thereafter adjourn the rest till next week. So there's three propositions effectively in front of, but we vote first of all on the first amendment that was formally made. So that's between Councillor Hannah's motion to adjourn now and Spears' motion to continue the meeting. Provost Bissett.
Continue the meeting.
Councillor Balfour. Sorry, Deputy Provost Balfour. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
I agree to continue.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor.
Continue.
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 Councillor Deacon.
Continue.
Councillor Devine.
Continue.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest.
Continue.
Councillor Garner.
Continue.
Councillor Hannah.
Adjourn.
Councillor Kelly.
Continue.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Continue.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Continue.
Councillor Murtha.
Continue.
Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patterson.
Continue.
Councillor Patrick.
Continue.
Councillor Redmond.
Continue.
Councillor Ritchie. Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Continue.
Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Spears.
The amendment.
And Councillor Steenbank. Provost, there was one vote to adjourn the meeting. There were 28 votes to continue. There was one abstention. The amendment to continue the meeting then becomes the substantive motion against which Councillor Meikle-John's amendment is made, which is continuing only to the end of this item and thereafter proceeding to appoint the COSLA delegates and thereafter adjourning to the date next week. So, Provost Bissett.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Balfour. So the amendment would be continuing the present item that we're dealing with and moving on to appoint the COSLA delegation, but everything else continue it to next week. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Amended.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Amendment.
Councillor Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Bundy.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Amendment.
Councillor Deacon.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Amendment.
Councillor Hannah.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr.
For the amendment.
Councillor McCabe.
Motion.
Councillor Meikle-John.
For the amendment.
Councillor Murtagh.
Amendment.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson. Councillor Patrick.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Spears. Motion. And Councillor Steinbank.
Amendment.
Provost, there are 3 votes for the motion. There are 26 votes for the amendment with 1 abstention. The court I agree to conclude this present item and then to move on in relation to the COSLA delegation, but thereafter to adjourn the meeting to next week. Thank you. Provost, maybe just to continue where we were within that particular item, we have concluded the issue with the Integration Joint Board, and I think we're moving on to item 2.6 in the leader's motion. I think it would be again appropriate to the leader on that aspect of her motion.
Okay, thank you, Provost Mr Moody. In relation to the Community Planning Board, again, we've looked to continue the sharing of the political places on that particular board, and that is SNP 1, Labour 1 and Conservatives 1. We also have the Champions Board, and I do apologise in that the paper that was circulated, I have made a mistake in that, and that it should only be 4 places from the Champions Board. The places in the Champions Board is not something that we decide, it is the Champions Board themselves that's decided that, and they were quite clear about the decision makers that they wanted to be at that particular board, and therefore the representation is the SNP 2, Labour 1, Conservatives 1, and I would ask that consideration is given to supporting that. There's a number of other items there that I think we probably need a bit of time to look at further. For example, SESTRAN, the Area Support Team in Scotland Excel. I'm happy that these will continue to a further meeting. And I don't know whether you would just wish me to continue to finish the item, Mr Moody, and just noting the requirement for the various training, but also the community champions that I would see being shared across the council, and the community champion that I would move from the SNP group would be Councillor Laura Murtagh as Equalities Champion. And I think that the rest here is self-explanatory.
Mr Moody. Thank you, Provost. And I think, as can be seen there, the leader has moved a political proportionality for 2 bodies, the membership of the Community Planning Partnership Board and also the Champions Board. So I think maybe the first question is there any amendment to that particular allocation as set down in the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Do we have any amendments to Councillor Nicholson's motion? Councillor Spears?
Just to say, a bit difficult picking some of that up. I take it as open to all elected members and groups.
That's, I think, the question that's before the council just now, Councillor Spears, is that we have 3 places on the Community Planning Partnership Board. Councillor Meiklejohn, as leader, is moving that those are divided as SNP 1, Labour 1, Conservative 1. And in relation to the Champions Board, is moving that it's SNP 2, Labour 1, Conservative 1. And the question is there an amendment to that as a proposition?
The new openness and proportionality that has been discussed earlier in the meeting, and for to exclude the non-aligned group seems a bit strange with the feeling I was getting about the meeting today, this New Hope Council. Has that been abandoned, or are we still being inclusive? Do you have an amendment, Councillor Spears? Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
We agree the first part, but we've got a person for the Equality Champion.
Provost, I think if we take things sequentially and deal with the proportionality first, I think that will be helpful. So as I understand it, there's no amendment from the floor on the question of those 2 bodies and the proportionality that's been proposed. That, I think, then would take us into particular appointments which are noted. The first of those is the Council's nomination to the Forth Valley Health Board. So there would be nominations sought in relation to that position.
Provost, I would move Councillor Collins.
Any other nominations to the Health Board?
Just to clarify, Provost, is that a single position? No.
Thank you, Provost. And in the absence of any further nominations, Councillor Colley is appointed as the Council's representative on Forth Valley Health Board. I think it can be seen, Provost, that the leader's motion suggests that some of the other positions, for instance on CESTRAN, on the area support team and on Scotland Excel, are continued to a future meeting. I suppose the question is, in part, are members content that that is continued to a future meeting, or do they wish to proceed with nominations now?
Everyone content to move that forward?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you.
And that then, I think, takes us to the question of the 4 elected member champions, which are helpfully set out in the motion which has been circulated. So as can be seen, there's a young people's champion, a veterans champion, an older people's champion, and an equalities champion. So I think, Provost, the simplest way to take that forward is to ask for nominations in relation to each of them. So I wonder if I could begin firstly with young people's champion.
Any other nominations for Young People's Champion? No.
And that being so, Provost, Councillor Steenbank is appointed as the Young People's Champion. We move on to Veterans Champion.
Any nominations for the Veterans Champion? Councillor Steenbank?
I would like to nominate.
Thank you. Any other nominations for the Veterans Champion? Councillor Kerr?
Councillor Robert Spears.
I'm sorry, I need to decline that. Thank you. Any further nominations? No.
And again, Provost, as there's only one nomination, Councillor Anslow is appointed as the Veterans Champion. We move to the Older People's Champion.
Any nominations for the Older People's Champion?
I would like to nominate Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any other nominations? No.
And again, Provost, in the absence of any further nomination, Councillor Kelly is duly appointed as the Older People's Champion. And we move to the Equalities and Human Rights Champion.
Any nominations for Equalities Champion and Human Rights Champion? Councillor Nicholson?
I've got Councillor Laura Murphy.
Any other nominations? Councillor Kerr?
Councillor James Munday, who is director and founder of Human Rights Charity.
Thank you. No further nominations.
And that being so, Provost, we move to the vote in relation to the appointment to Equalities and Human Rights Champion, for which the nominees are Councillor Murtagh and Councillor Bundy. Provost Bissett.
Councillor Murtagh.
Deputy Provost Balfour. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Anslow.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Binney. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Deacon.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Hannah.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCabe.
Abstain.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Bundy.
Councillor Redmond.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Ritchie has had to leave. Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Spears.
Councillor Bundy.
And Councillor Steinbach.
Councillor Murtagh.
Provost, there are 20 votes for Councillor Murtagh. There are 2 abstentions, and Councillor Murtagh is duly appointed as the Equalities and Human Rights Champion. And Provost, I think that brings us to the conclusion of that particular item, but in accordance with the agreement we made on the adjournment of the meeting, we proceed now to item 8 and the appointment of the delegates to the COSLA Convention.
Councillor Nicholson?
Apologies, Provost. I would, as has been the practice over many years, the proportionality around the council delegates to COSLA, move them as SNP2 and Labour 1 and Conservative 1, and that reflects the political balance within the council.
Thank you. Seconder?
Happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Excuse me.
Councillor Spears? Does that say that, is that a true demonstration of the desire to work collaboratively? That the independents will then again be excluded from this vote? Do you have an amendment, Councillor Spears? No, I'm asking for a clarification. Do you have an amendment to the proposal? Not at the moment. I'm asking for a clarification. What is it you want clarified? Is this, and I quote the leader, a demonstration of the desire to work collaboratively, that independents are not allowed to stand for this position?
I think that it clearly demonstrates the political balance of the council, as in how the council's been represented at Clogher for many years, Councillor Spears, and that's we are limited to the number of delegates that are allowed to have it at Clogher because it's determined for us.
I believe there is 4 delegates, so there would be 4 positions. There's 4 groupings. And does that demonstrate the desire to be working collectively, collaboratively? Yeah. Do you have an amendment, Councillor Spears? I'm just reminding you of the position this council is in. If you don't have an amendment, we've agreed that. Thank you. We'll move on.
And in relation to the agreement on the adjournment, Provost, that was the final item we were going to agree in the minutes accordingly. My apologies, Provost. There's just been a few gremlins with the microphones this morning and this afternoon. Accordingly, Provost, that's the final piece of business that we said would be done in accordance with the adjournment motion, which was agreed. The Council is accordingly adjourned to next week. The proposed time for the continued meeting is 10 o'clock on Wednesday of next week in the same place, so in the Lesser Town Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. And as Mr. Moody says, that concludes the first meeting of this term of the Council. I hope everyone has enjoyed the meeting, especially the new councillors, and sort of get a feel for how things work. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.